A janitor dies in a small town in Vermont. No one thinks much of it. He swept floors, pumped gas, fixed furnaces for a living. Then his will gets read, and the town finds out he quietly built an $8 million fortune. He gave millions to the hospital and the library. He never made a big salary. He never got a lucky tip. He just bought stocks, held them for decades, and let time do the work. Around that same moment, a former Merrill Lynch executive named Richard Fuscone filed for bankruptcy. Harvard-educated, six-figure salary for years. The kind of guy who looked like the definition of financial success. Foreclosed mansion, drained accounts, everything gone. Same country, same financial system, same decades to work with. One ends up rich, one ends up broke. And it's not about intelligence or income or who had the better degree. So what actually separates them? That's the real subject of this video. And the answer has almost nothing to do with money itself. Here's the uncomfortable truth this book leads with. Your relationship with money isn't built on spreadsheets. It's built on the narrow slice of the world you happen to grow up in. Take two teenagers at the same Seattle prep school in the late 1960s. One of them is Bill Gates. His school is one of maybe a handful on the entire planet with access to a computer terminal, a total fluke of timing and location. Gates gets essentially unlimited hours on that machine while he's still a kid. Years before almost anyone else his age has touched one. That head start becomes Microsoft. But there's someone else in that story history skips over. Kent Evans, Gates's close friend and early partner on that same computer. Evans was every bit as sharp, every bit as driven. He died in a mountaineering accident before he ever got the chance to see where it led. Same access, same raw talent, same odds of extreme success. And one outcome was luck. The other was risk. That's the part people leave out when they study self-made success. The line between the two is razor thin, and you can't see it from the outside. When you study someone like Gates, you're only allowed to see the version of the story where the coin landed heads. Here's the takeaway. When you look at wildly successful people and try to copy their exact moves, you're missing the part of the story where luck was doing more work than you think. And when you look at people who failed doing the exact same things, you have to give risk that same respect. Copy the broad behaviors, not the specific bets. Nobody's success is ever 100% skill. Nobody's failure is ever 100% luck. But knowing that luck is invisible doesn't explain why smart, already successful people blow it all up on purpose. And that's where this book gets genuinely dark. Rajat Gupta wasn't some outsider gambling with money he couldn't afford to lose. He ran McKinsey. He sat on the board of Goldman Sachs. By any normal measure, the man had already won. He was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And then, he threw it away for more. Gupta got caught passing insider information to a hedge fund manager. Tips that, by some estimates, made him a few extra $1 million. Money he did not need in any material sense. He went to prison. He lost his reputation for good, all to add a rounding error to a fortune that already covered every want he had. This wasn't a one-off. The book lines Gupta up next to other already rich, already comfortable people who got wiped out reaching for a number that was never going to satisfy them anyway, because the goalpost moves the second you hit it. Here's the lesson, and it's the one ambitious people need most. There is no financial finish line that enough doesn't require you to define for yourself in advance. If you don't set that number before you get there, you'll keep risking what you have for what you don't need. The single greatest skill in money isn't earning more. It's knowing when to stop reaching. So reaching too hard can wipe you out. Fine. Then what actually builds a fortune? Not a smarter strategy. Something almost boring. Warren Buffett is worth somewhere north of $100 billion. Everyone assumes that comes down to being the greatest stock picker who ever lived. It doesn't. Here's the number that breaks people's brains when they hear it. The overwhelming majority of Buffett's net worth arrived after he turned 50, most of it after 65. He wasn't a better investor at 60 than he was at 30. He was the same investor. What changed is that he'd been compounding since he was 10 years old. Quietly, patiently. Without interruption, he started early, and more importantly, he never stopped. He never had a catastrophic blow-up that wiped the slate and forced him to start the clock over. Run the math, and it gets almost absurd. Picture Buffett starting at a normal age and retiring at a normal age. Instead of starting as a literal child and still going strong in his 90s, the vast majority of his fortune simply wouldn't exist. Even with the exact same skill, the exact same decisions. The takeaway here isn't start early, though that helps. It's this. The single biggest lever in building wealth isn't your return rate. It's how long you can stay in the game without getting knocked out of it. For a founder or investor, the goal is never squeezing out the highest possible return this year. It's building something that can survive the years that go badly, so compounding never has to reset. Here's where it gets interesting though. Because survive the bad years sounds obvious, and yet some of the most talented moneymakers in history couldn't do it. Jesse Livermore was, by raw skill, one of the greatest traders who ever lived. He shorted the market before the 1929 crash. He personally walked away with what would be worth close to $1 billion today, at a moment when almost everyone else on Wall Street was being wiped out. He had the instincts. He had the track record. He had already proven, more than once, that he understood markets better than almost anyone alive. And he still went bankrupt. Multiple times. Because Livermore's whole approach was maximum aggression, minimum room for error. Every trade bet big, every swing designed to squeeze the absolute most out of being right. That works spectacularly, right up until the one time you're wrong at the wrong moment with too much on the table. Eventually the losses outran even his brilliance. It ended with Livermore taking his own life, broke, after making and losing several fortunes across his career. Compare that to the janitor from the start of this video. Ronald Reed never made one brilliant trade in his life. He didn't need to. He just never let one bad decision take him out of the game. Getting rich and staying rich are two completely different skills, and the second one is almost entirely about leaving yourself margin. Cash you don't need to touch. Decisions you don't need to get exactly right. Room to be wrong without it being fatal. The lesson, the smartest financial strategy isn't the one that maximizes your upside. It's the one that guarantees you're still playing tomorrow. Build slack into your business and your finances on purpose, even when it feels inefficient, because the version of you that survives a bad year always beats the version that optimized for a good one. So it's not the biggest wins. Then, what's money actually for? The book's answer isn't what you'd guess, and it isn't a bigger house or a nicer car. Housel calls it the highest dividend money pays, the ability to wake up and control what you do with your day. Not a yacht, not a number on a screen. The option to say no to a job you hate, to spend a random Tuesday afternoon with your kid instead of in a meeting, to walk away from a deal that doesn't sit right with you without it wrecking you financially. That's a quiet, almost invisible kind of wealth. It doesn't show up in a driveway. Nobody can see it from the outside, and that's exactly why it gets undervalued. The entire financial industry, and honestly, most of social media, is built around signaling wealth you can see, not building the wealth you can actually feel in your daily life. Here's the takeaway. Real financial success isn't the size of your bank account. It's the size of the gap between what you're forced to do and what you get to choose. Every dollar you save isn't just future spending power, it's future control over your own time. So go back to that janitor and that bankrupt executive standing side by side. One of them chased visible wealth and lost everything trying to look richer than he was. The other quietly let modest, boring decisions compound for 50 years. He never let a single bad year knock him out of the game. The gap between them was never intelligence, or income, or opportunity. It was behavior, patience, humility about luck, and knowing exactly where enough was. There's a lot more nuance in Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money than 12 minutes can hold. It's one of those rare finance books that reads more like a philosophy book, genuinely worth having on your shelf. So here's the real question this leaves you with. If nobody could see your bank balance, your car, or your house, if wealth was invisible, would you still be making the same financial decisions you're making right now? If this hit different, hit subscribe. The algorithm actually rewards channels people come back to, and this one's built to help you think clearer about money, one book at a time.